so excited to do this interview because every time you've exuded such integrity and such, I don't know, it's such genuine, you come across as such a genuine person, and I love talking to you. So thank you so much for agreeing to this.
Thank you, miigwech.
So Moon of the Crusted Snow, I loved it, and it's a dystopia. And one of the things that I really love about it is that it's, I actually, we're just about to put something up on the Authors Book Club website, but I said it was a masterclass in suspense, and the fact that it's so well crafted and so tight. And I'm wondering how you got to that process, and is the new novel mirroring that?
Well, thanks a lot for having me, Fiona. Very honored to chat with you today. And I really appreciate your kind words about Moon of the Crusted Snow and the work that went into it. Having it, I guess, tightly written, I think was, I have to give a lot of credit to my editor, Susan Renouf at ECW Press, for really helping me tighten it up in that way. And I think from the original draft to the final one, we did do a lot of whittling down. And I think for me, it was a matter of, I guess, adapting my writing style, learning how to be an effective and efficient fiction writer, and really finding a way to build suspense in a concise way. Because this is the first time I've written something that's more along the lines of a thriller, right? As a dystopian / post-apocalyptic novel. So I think in some of the first drafts, there were some kind of drawn out descriptions and maybe some slower moments that we really had to cut and, try to make more efficient in terms of getting from different points of the plot to other points of the plot, right? It was the result of a really focused collaborative editing process. And I've really learned from that experience, and I'm taking that into the next part of the story, which is the sequel that I'm, currently, right deep into, So it's been fun, like I didn't go to school for English. I don't have a master's in, fine arts and creative writing or anything like that. I'm a journalist by trade, and learning how to be, I guess, a fiction writer, I guess it's been part of my writing journey throughout. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. So in Moon of the Crusted Snow, and you helped me with this, to go back at the end, the ending is a little ambiguous, and I had to go back and read much more carefully to get what you were saying. Are we allowed to? So the sequel, is it a true sequel not a true, that's the wrong word. Is it a sequel in the sense that it picks up like 6 months later? Is it a sequel that picks up, 10 years later? Is it a sequel that picks up with our main protagonist and his family? Or have we gone out into the broader community to continue the story? How did you vision the sequel?
Well, and I will just say, I apologize for all the background noise. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Our kindergartner is doing school at home. We also have a 11-month-old baby here. And our house is not that big, so sound carries to everything. So for those of you watching, that's the root of all the sound you're hearing in the background. So the sequel, it picks up 10 years after the end of Moon of the Crusted Snow, and the basic plot is the community there in the far north has realized that their resources in that land that they now call home are wearing a little thin. And they decide that they need to seek somewhere else to live eventually. Also bearing in mind that they are Anishinaabe originally from the Great Lakes area. So they were displaced to far northern Ontario as a result of colonialism. And what they want to do is reclaim their homeland down on the north shore of Lake Huron and Georgian Bay. So a group of them sets forth to see what's left of the world in the south, and also to determine if they can, in fact, move back home. So it's more or less a quest story. And throughout their journey, they make some enlightening discoveries, some grim discoveries. They come into contact with some, well, I don't want to give too much away, but they come into contact with some people, and ultimately they have to really make some tough decisions about how they're going to proceed, and if they can actually make this move from the north to their original homelands. So that's a sequel to Moon of the Crescent Snow in a nutshell.
Wow, I'm intrigued. Do you have a working title?
We're calling it Moon of the Turning Leaves right now. I don't know if that will hold up, but I'm leaning towards that. It seems like it'll stick, but we'll see.
Okay, so Moon of the Crusted Snow, you said you had made some decisions about what happened to the people in the South. Were you able to examine that further then in the sequel? And did you keep your original impressions, or did you change as the story evolved?
Yeah, I think I have to reveal some of what happened in the next part because, you know, people have stuck, by that point, readers will have stuck with the story for a long time and they'll want to know a little more. So I do owe readers a bit of an explanation, I think. I won't peel back the curtain totally. I'll sort of give some glimpses as to what potentially happened to the rest of the world. But yeah, I think I have to at this point. I can't keep it a secret for too much longer, right?
Yeah.
Because people will want a bit of resolution anyway. So yeah, if you're wondering what happened, you get a slightly clearer idea in the second one.
Thanks. But the second part, did it change for you, or did you stay true to your vision of what happened in the storytelling?
Yeah, it stayed true. The idea I had about the cause of the end of the world stuck. It will stay into the next one.
So you talked about all the learning you did when you originally wrote Moon of the Crusted Snow. Was this therefore easier to write or harder to write because you had a really Moon of the Crusted Snow was a success. So did that create a psychological weight as well?
It's a good question. I think it was a bit of both. It was both easier and a little more difficult. And to say how it was easier is that I had the whole backstory already written in the first story, right? I had all the characters developed and I had that world really researched and fully formed. So the most difficult part, I think, was just imagining what the world would look like 10 years after this event and, what people would encounter and experience in that sense, right? So I really had to sort of dream hard about how the story would work in a compelling way, right? And how that happened, really, I guess it was sort of an organic development in that, I never intended to write a sequel to Moon of the Crescent Snow. I always intended it to stand alone, and I, sort of let those characters ride off into the sunset in my mind. And but when the story started getting some attention, and I started doing public events around it back in the fall of 2018. That's when people started asking me if I would ever consider writing a sequel. And at first I said no. I said no. I'm done with that. I'm satisfied with how that ended. But then I realized, people wanted more. And if readers were the people who were fueling the interest in this story, then I felt I owed it to the readers to take it to another level. And so I started basically thinking about some potential ideas for the next parts, but not really committing to any particular ideas. But then when the opportunity came up to actually get the sequel published, and I have to give credit to my agent, Denise Bukowski, for finding that opportunity. Basically what happened was she paired me with, she found interest through Penguin Random House for the next part. And we had some discussions. I had some discussions with an editor and the publisher there. And they just wanted to know how the next part of the story would look. And that's when I started really thinking hard about creating this next part of the story. And that started probably in the fall of 2019. That's when I first was in contact with them. And my new editor, Rick Meyer, who I'll be working with, he and I just started having some conversations like once a month. He would just check in and say, hey, what are you thinking about the next part of Moon of the Crusted Snow? And, we'd chat. And eventually I had a whole outline written that I shared with him. And he was really interested. And that's when they decided that they wanted to publish it. So they essentially commissioned it, which was really cool. And for the last year, I've been working hard on it for about the last year. So yeah, to answer your original question, it was both easier and harder. It was easy because I have the original backstory already done. It was harder in that I had to imagine an interesting way to take it to the next level. But I'm nearly done the first draft now, and I'm feeling overall pretty good about it. We'll probably be editing and revising until early next year, and hopefully it'll be out in the fall of 2022.
That's wonderful. And in a sense, it's easier because the business side of it was kind of taken care of it ahead of time, as opposed to shopping around with a draft and, kind of. I always find it interesting how these things evolve so differently from for every person, and in your case, and every project. It really is interesting. Is, of course, we are, as you alluded to, in a pandemic. How did that influence your writing or the tone of your writing I mean, this is a dystopia, right? And we're kind of living in a mild form of dystopia right now. So how did those two things go together in terms of mood and in terms of process?
That's a good question, because it's something I've been sort of kicking around in my head for the last year. I don't think it influenced the tone or the overall atmosphere of the story itself. It did alter my plans for, I guess, the research and development phase of it, because I wanted to spend a lot of time, researching some history, researching some cultural elements of my Anishinaabe background. So no, it didn't alter. It hasn't altered how I'm writing it. Like, I don't think it would have changed it either way in that sense. But what I wanted to do when I was planning, creating this story was, doing a lot of visiting, with elders, with, knowledge keepers, with just being out on the land and being amongst the Anishinaabe, right? And of course, none of that could happen because of the pandemic, because we can't get together, for safety reasons, which I totally understand and support. So I had to change that a bit, and I did a lot of reading instead. And I did some Zoom and phone calls with, knowledge keepers that I wanted to be in touch with, and even some emailing back and forth, right? But the whole reason I wanted to do that was just to be influenced and inspired by my Anishinaabe background. And a lot of that stuff is not even going to end up in the story. I just wanted to be amongst my people and be with my culture and carry this story forth in a good way. So that really was the intent behind all of that. So that has not changed. Just the way I did it changed, right? Like, ideally, it would have been better to be out, visiting with people, doing ceremonies and so on. But we all have to, pivot, as the word has been thrown around so many times. And I'm still happy with how it's unfolding. And we'll see what happens throughout the revision process.
I mean, one of the things that I love about Moon of the Crusted Snow is, there's two kind of takeaways. The minute snow falls and I hear a snowmobile, I'm like, I always take a pause. I always think of that scene in the book, and I'm always like, geez, will snowmobiles forever be a moment of uh-oh for me? And I don't write or anything, but I live somewhat rurally, and so they're around, and I hear a snowmobile, and I'm like, oh, not good. That's one of the things. But the other thing that I think that I love so much about Moon of the Crusted Snow is that it's really I take it as, and I hope I'm correct, it's a thank you to an honor of the resilience of your people, and and the fact that they have the knowledge and the history to survive no matter what. And I really I found that a very a touching part of the dystopia. That just sounds like the weirdest sentence ever.
I like that. No, I like that. A dystopia can be touching. A dystopia can be hopeful, right? Because it's a reimagining of the future, and it's an opportunity to renew. So I'm all for that kind of description.